On Friday, October 24, 1890, in Kentish Town, London, England, a short chain of ordinary decisions brought 3 adults and 1 child into the same small corner of North London. The central figure was Phoebe Hogg, 31 years of age. She lived with her husband in a modest rented house not far from Prince of Wales Road, within walking distance of Kentish Town Road. She had married Frank Hogg in November 1888 when she was already expecting their first child. By the autumn of 1890, that child, a girl named Phoebe Hansel Hogg and called Tiggy within the family, was 18 months old. Her husband, Frank Hogg, worked away from the house during the day and returned late in the evening. He was known in the district and had dealings with several households in North London. He kept a routine that took him out in the morning and brought him back after dark, so that on weekdays his wife was usually responsible for the care of the child and the running of their rooms. A third person, Mary Eleanor Wheeler, then about 24 years of age, lived close by at No. 2 Priory Street, Kentish Town. She had first been known under the name Mary Wheeler, and had lived for a time with a carpenter named John Charles Pearcey, from whom she had taken and kept the surname. By 1890, she occupied the small house in Priory Street and supported herself with irregular work and with help from acquaintances. Frank Hogg was among those acquaintances. He possessed a key to her house and had been on familiar terms with her since before his marriage. The distance between the Hogg home near Prince of Wales Road and Mary Pearcey's house in Priory Street was not great. Both addresses lay in the same general neighborhood of North London under the same parish and within the same daily traffic of shopkeepers, porters, and carters. On the evening of October 23, 1890, a local boy called at the Hogg house with a short penciled note from Mary Pearcey. It invited Phoebe to come to No. 2 Priory Street the next afternoon and to bring the child. Phoebe kept the note and said nothing that suggested reluctance to go. The next day, she prepared to keep that appointment. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Phoebe Hogg arrived at the doorway of No. 2 Priory Street with her daughter in the bassinet carriage. Charles Britt, who lived nearby, observed her knock once at the door and wait a short moment before entering. She guided the carriage inside and closed the door behind her. After stepping into the hallway, she removed her gloves in the manner common to short household visits and placed them near the entrance. She checked the blanket covering the child, then moved further into the lower rooms of the house with the carriage close by. A little before 4 o'clock, Charlotte Piddington, who lived next door, heard the sound of glass breaking from the direction of No. 2 Priory Street. She paused her work briefly, listened, and then heard a child crying. She did not go to the adjoining house or attempt to speak to anyone there. She later stated only the sequence of noises she heard at that time. During this same period, no one on the street reported seeing Phoebe leave the house. No passer-by noted her at the doorway, and no neighbor observed her guiding the carriage back toward Prince of Wales Road. The bassinet carriage brought inside when she arrived did not reappear in the street while these sounds were heard. These constitute the final verified movements connected to Phoebe Hogg on the afternoon of October 24, 1890. No confirmed sighting places her outside No. 2 Priory Street after her entry at 3. Toward 10 o'clock that night, Frank Hogg returned to his home near Prince of Wales Road and found the rooms quiet. He called his wife's name once and waited, expecting to hear movement from the lower floor. When no one answered, he checked the bassinet carriage space in the hallway and saw that it was empty. He then looked to the mantel where household papers were usually kept, but found nothing that indicated where his wife and child had gone earlier in the day. He considered the possibility that she had taken the child to Rickmansworth to visit her father, a trip she occasionally made when circumstances allowed. He remained in the house for a short period, walking between the front room and the entryway, then stepped outside to make a simple check of the street. No neighbor reported having seen her return. A little after this, he decided to walk to Priory Street. He followed the usual route and stopped at the doorway of No. 2. He knocked and waited. There was no response from inside. He remained at the threshold briefly, then left the house and retraced his steps along the same path back toward Prince of Wales Road. As the hour advanced, he prepared to wait until morning. He remained inside the house, moving between the front window and the passageway from time to time, but there were no further sounds of arrival. No confirmed witness reported seeing Phoebe Hogg or the child in the district after 3 that afternoon, and no message was delivered to the house during the night. Towards 7 o'clock that evening, a man named MacDonald, who lived near Bell's Park, walked along Crossfield Road in Hampstead. As he proceeded along the pavement, he saw a figure lying near the edge of the roadway. He slowed his steps, looked more closely, and stopped a short distance away. He approached the figure and stood beside it for a moment. He then bent slightly to observe whether the person showed any sign of movement. After confirming none, he straightened and remained at the location long enough to ensure that the figure was not attempting to rise or shift position. He did not make physical contact. After this brief inspection, he stepped back from the position of the remains. Believing that assistance was required, MacDonald turned toward the nearest point where a constable might be found. He walked to seek help and soon encountered Constable Gardner, who was on duty in the area. MacDonald informed him of what he had seen on Crossfield Road. Constable Gardner accompanied him back to the location. On reaching the spot, the constable examined the figure at a close but careful distance. He then asked for the presence of another constable, and Constable Stalker arrived shortly afterward. Both officers viewed the position of the remains from more than one angle, but did not attempt to move the figure. After confirming that further oversight was necessary, the officers arranged for medical assistance. They remained near the location and prevented passers-by from approaching too closely. No movement of the remains occurred during this period. During the night following the discovery on Crossfield Road, the authorities began formal examination of the adult woman found at that location. Dr. Pullet Wells carried out the first inspection shortly after his arrival. He confirmed the absence of life and noted that the position of the figure did not suggest that the fatal injury had occurred where she was found. No further handling was conducted at that time. On the following morning, a more detailed forensic examination was carried out by Dr. Thomas Bond. He recorded a severe injury to the head. The width and form of the wound were consistent with a heavy blunt instrument capable of delivering a direct blow. Cuts along the forearm corresponded to the type of injuries produced by broken glass. Dr. Bond limited his remarks to these visible findings and entered no speculation regarding their cause. Arrangements for identification began soon after. Mary Hogg arrived and was brought to view the remains. She stepped forward, paused briefly, and placed her hand on the edge of the table before giving her confirmation that the woman was her sister, Phoebe Hogg. Her actions were confined to the recognition itself, and she did not remain in the room longer than required. Following Clara's confirmation, contact was made with the husband, Frank Hogg. He attended shortly afterward. He approached the viewing position, leaned slightly forward to observe the features, and gave his acknowledgement to the officials. He asked a short question regarding the known sequence of events, and the authorities replied that additional information was still being collected. Later that same morning, a separate report reached the authorities concerning the discovery of a child. Oliver Smith, passing along Finchley Road, had found a young girl lying near the roadside. He notified those nearby and the police were informed. The child was brought under official care and examined. Dr. Bond conducted the examination of the child's remains after completing the work related to the adult woman. He determined that death had resulted from obstruction of the airway. No broader interpretation was recorded. The findings were entered in the same formal manner as the previous examination. Following the completion of both examinations and the identifications, Dr. Bond entered the official causes of death for the adult woman: severe head injury caused by a blunt instrument; for the child, obstruction of breathing. Both deaths were classified as willful killing by person or persons unknown. Later that morning, after the examinations had begun, the authorities continued to receive reports from residents along the roads extending north and west of Hampstead. These reports concerned objects noticed during the early hours and were checked in order by the constables assigned to the district. The first confirmed item was the bassinet carriage located at Hamilton Terrace. A resident had seen it standing near the roadside without anyone attending it. He looked briefly inside, observed a darkened area along the lining, and informed the police. A constable arrived, examined the carriage without altering its position, and arranged for it to be taken under official control. Shortly afterward, another item was collected near Crossfield Road, close to where the adult woman had been found the night before. It was a single button lying on the ground. The constable noted its position, lifted it, and placed it with the day's recovered articles. No interpretation was entered in the record at this point. As these objects were logged, officers compared the places where they had been found with statements given during the previous evening. They noted that the last confirmed sighting of Phoebe Hogg had been at the doorway of No. 2 Priory Street in the company of her child. They also recorded that two residents, Elizabeth Rogers and Annie Gardner, had seen Mary Pearcey pushing a heavy carriage later that same afternoon. The alignment of these accounts with the route along which the items had been discovered gave the authorities cause to examine the premises at Priory Street. Inspector Bannister and accompanying officers proceeded to No. 2 Priory Street to verify whether additional material was present. They entered the lower rooms and observed two panes of glass broken inward from a window. On several fragments lay bao chow pape. A blunt household instrument used for tending a fire was found nearby with marks resembling those earlier noted. A carving knife rested on a surface within the same room bearing similar discoloration. Each item was collected carefully and placed under official custody. The officers continued their inspection of the accessible rooms and noted no further objects of relevance. Once these items had been secured, they recorded the findings in the day's log and prepared them for later examination by the medical authorities. The inquest opened at Marylebone under the direction of the coroner, whose task was to examine the circumstances connected with the deaths of the woman and the child. The proceedings began with the formal identification already recorded by the medical officers. The coroner then called the first witness. Dr. Thomas Bond presented the medical findings. He stated that the adult woman had sustained a severe injury to the head consistent with a heavy blunt instrument. He recorded several cuts upon the forearm that matched the narrow pattern commonly produced by broken glass. He further stated that the child had died from obstruction of the airway. His remarks remained strictly within the limits of the physical observations and no additional interpretation was offered. The next witness was Charles Britt. He testified that during the afternoon, he saw the woman arrive at a residence with her child at around 3. She knocked once entered and closed the door behind her. He did not observe her leave and noted no further movement at the doorway. Charlotte Piddington then gave her account. She stated that she heard the sound of breaking glass later in the afternoon and subsequently heard the crying of a child. She did not approach the property and saw no one at the entrance. Elizabeth Rogers and Annie Gardner were called in turn. Both stated that towards 6 o'clock they saw a woman guiding a heavy carriage along the roadway. They described the carriage as difficult to manage and observed that the woman kept her attention forward. Neither followed her nor made further inquiry. Oliver Smith presented his statement concerning the following morning. While passing along Finchley Road, he observed the small figure of a child lying near the roadside. He notified those nearest to him and remained until officials arrived. After these civilian testimonies, the coroner received a summary from Inspector Bannister. He stated that the movements described by the witnesses placed the deceased woman within a particular residence during the afternoon and placed another woman later guiding a carriage along a route connected with the positions where the objects and remains had been found. He reported that items collected from the residence were under examination and that on the basis of the accounts and recovered material, Mary Eleanor Wheeler had been taken into custody for further questioning. He added that she stated only that she was innocent of the charge. The coroner then reviewed the evidence presented and instructed the panel convened for the inquiry to consider the circumstances strictly within their remit. After a short consultation, the panel stated that the deaths of both the woman and the child were to be classified as willful murder by person or persons unknown and noted that a suspect, Mary Eleanor Wheeler, was being held in custody while the investigation continued. During the days following the inquest, numerous reports circulated among the districts between Kentish Town, Hampstead, and St. John's Wood. Residents exchanged accounts of movements they believed significant, though many statements could not be verified by the authorities. Some individuals reported having seen a woman guiding a carriage at various points along the northern roads. The hours and positions described varied widely, and the reports did not form a consistent sequence. Officers recorded the remarks, but did not incorporate them into the main inquiry. Several persons came forward with claims that the woman or child had been seen after the time established by the confirmed witnesses. These accounts differed in appearance, clothing, and location, and none matched the established timeline. They were entered into the notes as uncorroborated. A number of residents stated that they had heard the movement of a wheeled object or the voice of a woman passing quickly during the evening in question. These sounds were vague in nature and associated with no identifiable figure. Constables interviewed the informants and recorded only the hour and general character of the noises. Informal remarks also circulated regarding supposed past disagreements or personal tensions involving individuals connected with the case. These conversations, though repeated widely, were not supported by documented evidence. The authorities noted the existence of such comments, but placed no weight upon them within the inquiry. Several persons brought small objects they believed might bear relation to the matter. These included pieces of cloth, loose buttons, and minor personal items found in public spaces. After being examined by officers, none of the objects were judged to have any connection to the case, and each was dismissed without further action. Letters also arrived from persons outside London who believed the deaths might be linked to other unsolved occurrences. These letters contained no verifiable information. Officers recorded their receipt and set them aside. Throughout this period, the authorities continued to review only the material already secured during the earlier stages. The unverified public reports did not alter the established line of inquiry, and no new leads of value emerged from these submissions. The investigation remained centered upon the confirmed movements recorded in the days preceding the discovery. Late in the week, the authorities received the preliminary examination notes for the objects collected earlier from the residence that had been inspected. The fire poker taken from the lower room showed markings in a broad pattern consistent with the injury recorded on the adult woman's head. Several fragments of the inward broken window pane bore darkened staining, whose form corresponded with the narrow cuts documented upon her forearm. These observations were entered as findings of significance with the correspondence between the recovered objects and the medical report now established. The inquiry shifted from the review of public statements to the examination of a defined line of evidence, and preparations were made to advance the matter into full criminal investigation. Following the preliminary examination of the recovered objects, the authorities proceeded with formal questioning of the individuals connected to the case. The first interview was conducted with Frank Hogg, the husband of the deceased woman. He acknowledged that he had maintained a private relationship with Mary Eleanor Wheeler for more than a year. He stated that his wife had not been aware of this connection. He also confirmed that he had at one time possessed a key that allowed entry to Mary's residence, though he stated that he no longer used it and had made no arrangement to visit on the afternoon in question. These admissions were entered into the investigative notes. The officers then reviewed the last verified movement of the deceased woman, which placed her and her child at Mary Pearcey's residence during the afternoon. No other confirmed sighting existed between that moment and the later discoveries. Mary Pearcey was then questioned. She denied involvement in the deaths and stated that she had no knowledge of how the woman or child came to harm. She did not dispute that the woman visited her residence, but stated that the visit had been brief and without incident. She declined to add further detail. Later that week, the authorities received the preliminary laboratory notes for the objects collected from the Priory Street residence. The fire poker taken from the lower room showed markings in a broad form consistent with the injury documented on the adult woman's head. Several fragments of the inward broken window pane bore darkened staining, whose pattern corresponded with the narrow cuts recorded on her forearm. These correspondences were entered as findings of importance. With the physical evidence now aligned with the medical report and with the husband's admissions establishing the nature of his connection to Mary, the investigators undertook a second and more detailed examination of the suspect. During this interview, she altered parts of her earlier statement. She acknowledged that she had written a short note inviting the woman to visit and had arranged for it to be conveyed by the child. She stated that the intention, as she described it, was to speak privately regarding matters connected to Frank Hogg. She further acknowledged that the woman arrived during the afternoon and that they took tea. She described the conversation as strained. She stated that a disagreement arose, that the discussion escalated, and that she lost command of herself. She did not offer a detailed sequence of events following this moment, nor did she provide an account of the child's injuries. She stated only that the situation passed beyond her ability to manage. The investigators entered this amended statement into the record alongside the timeline, the admissions of Frank Hogg, and the physical correspondences between the recovered objects and the injuries described in the medical report. They concluded that the relationship between the parties, the note inviting the deceased woman to the residence, the meeting confirmed by both sides, and the alignment of physical evidence formed the principal grounds on which the matter would advance. No alternative individual was identified whose movements or associations presented a comparable alignment of evidence. The case was then prepared for transfer to the next stage of legal examination. The trial of Mary Eleanor Wheeler opened on Monday, the first day of December in the year 1890 at the Central Criminal Court of the Old Bailey, London. The proceedings were presided over by Mr. Justice Denman. The Crown was represented by Mr. Forrest Fulton, assisted by Mr. C.F. Gill. The defense was conducted by Mr. Arthur Hutton. A full jury panel was assembled and the indictment for willful murder was read according to the procedure of the court. The prosecution commenced by outlining the established movements of the deceased woman and her child, stating that both had been last seen entering the accused residence during the afternoon of the day in question. They then produced the objects recovered from the premises, the fire poker bearing markings consistent with the broad injury recorded on the woman's head and several fragments of inward broken window glass bearing discoloration corresponding with the narrow cuts documented upon her forearm. These items were presented in sequence. Medical testimony followed. Dr. Bond reiterated the injuries as described in his original report and affirmed the correspondences between the wounds and the recovered objects. Civilian witnesses restated their accounts: the arrival at the residence, the sound of breaking glass, the sighting of a woman guiding a heavy carriage later in the day, and the discovery of the child on the following morning. The prosecution then entered the amended statement made by the accused during her second examination, in which she acknowledged having written a note inviting the deceased woman to visit, confirmed that they had taken tea, and described the conversation as strained. When called upon to answer the charge, the accused stated plainly, "I am innocent of this charge." During cross-examination, counsel for the prosecution questioned whether her amended account could be reconciled with her earlier denial of any meaningful exchange. They asked her to clarify her statement that the situation passed beyond her ability to manage. The accused repeated that she had no intention to cause harm. The defense then presented its case. Counsel argued that the amended statement did not constitute an admission of guilt and that the prosecution had not produced a witness sequence within the residence. He stated that the physical correspondences, though notable, did not demonstrate the manner in which the injuries had been sustained. He further submitted that the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial alignment and that the accused continued to maintain her innocence. The defense urged the jury to consider the absence of direct observation and the limited nature of the accused's statements. The prosecution replied only in procedural terms, restating that the evidence placed before the court represented the findings of the investigation. No additional commentary was offered. Mr. Justice Denman then instructed the jury to consider solely the verified facts presented during the proceedings. The jury retired shortly before midday on Wednesday, the 3rd day of December, and returned after approximately 52 minutes of deliberation. They delivered a verdict of guilty of willful murder. The sentence prescribed by law for the offense was then entered. On the morning appointed for its execution, the accused was asked whether she wished to speak. She replied, "My sentence is a just one, but a good deal of the evidence against me was false." The sentence was carried out according to the procedure of the time. In the years that followed, the streets and premises associated with the inquiry continued to be mentioned in connection with the events, and the case remained among the formal records of the period. Before we end this story, there is one question that still divides those who study the case. In her final moments, Mary Pearcey said, "My sentence is a just one, but a good deal of the evidence against me was false." What do you think she meant by that? Was she referring to the physical objects recovered from her home, to the amended statement she later tried to reinterpret, or was she trying to shift blame in the final hours of her life? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Why do you think Mary claimed the evidence against her was